My husband, Nick, divorced me nearly 9 years ago over a misunderstanding, refusing to give me a chance to explain. Now, after almost a decade, he's unexpectedly back at my doorstep. I'm 38, and Nick is 40. We were married for 3 years, and he was generally a good husband. But one day, he came home to find my ex-boyfriend, Joe, visiting. We all knew each other from college. Joe and I had a brief relationship before I fell for Nick. Joe was just inviting us to his upcoming wedding, but Nick jumped to conclusions and left without a word. I tried to chase after him, but he drove away, blocking me everywhere, leaving me devastated and confused. Joe attempted to reach out to Nick, too, but he'd also been blocked. I held on to hope that once Nick calmed down, he'd return, and I could explain. Instead, he filed for divorce a few days later. I was heartbroken but chose not to contest it. I felt he didn't think I was worth the effort. I packed my things, moved in with a friend, and focused on rebuilding my life. I was angry and hurt but refused to let it consume me. Fast forward a month after my divorce, I attended Joe's wedding, reconnecting with old friends. Nick skipped the event, which didn't surprise me. It was a shock to everyone that we had separated, as most thought we'd last forever. However, that wedding became pivotal for me. I met Chris, a 40-year-old man who would later become my husband. I felt an instant connection but chose to take things slow. A year later, we crossed paths again at a work event, and this time, I agreed to go out with him. 2 years later, we were married, and a year after that, we welcomed our beautiful daughter, who is now almost 5. Then, just a few days ago, I was stunned when Nick appeared at my door with roses, smiling as if nothing had happened. My husband, Chris, and I were home with our daughter when the doorbell rang. Nick explained that he learned from a friend that Joe was married to someone else. Realizing he'd overreacted all those years ago, he was asking for forgiveness and a second chance. I couldn't believe it. After all this time, Nick thought he could waltz back into my life and get a do-over when he denied me the same chance. I stared at him in disbelief, my anger bubbling beneath the surface. Instead of slamming the door, I decided on something more dramatic. I told him to wait a moment, walked into the living room, and lifted my daughter into my arms, asking Chris to follow me. When we returned to the door, Nick's expression shifted to horror as he realized I was now a family woman. I smiled sweetly at him and told him it was too late for second chances, then asked him to leave. He stood there in stunned silence before turning and rushing to his car without another word. I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had finally stood up for myself after all those years. Once he left, I shared what happened with Chris, and we both had a good laugh about it. Nick clearly hadn't bothered to check on my life. A simple glance at my social media would have shown I was married and had a daughter. Chris pointed out how self-centered Nick must be to think I'd still be waiting for him after everything. A few days later, I received a message from Nick on Facebook from a new account. He claimed to be hurt by my actions, saying he genuinely wanted to apologize but felt I had mocked him instead. He still felt remorse for his past behavior but believed I owed him an apology for humiliating him. In response, I chose not to reply. He doesn't deserve my sympathy or forgiveness, let alone an apology. Chris was right. Nick assumed I'd been pining for him, waiting for the day he'd decide to return. Nick had always been self-centered, and unfortunately, I ignored the red flags before marrying him. They were always there. He didn't change overnight. I was too blinded by love to see him for who he truly was. Once we were together, he made it awkward for me to spend time with other guys, even friends. He wouldn't confront me directly but would later make a big deal out of it, so I began avoiding male friends altogether, only speaking to them in Nick's presence. He insisted that I quit my job to be a housewife because his job required long hours. He wanted our home ready for him when he returned, claiming he didn't trust anyone else to handle it but me. Feeling honored at the time, I willingly gave up my well-paying job to be the perfect housewife. Despite everything I sacrificed, he never gave me a chance to explain myself. Nick was particularly jealous of Joe, my first boyfriend in college. His possessiveness intensified whenever Joe was involved, despite my loyalty and the fact that I would never cheat, but he clearly didn't trust me. After our divorce, I was devastated. It took me a long time to heal and open my heart to love again. Some might say I rushed into another relationship, and perhaps that's true. I can't deny that dating someone just a year after a divorce might seem quick, but I don't regret it. Taking that leap of faith led me to my wonderful husband and our beautiful daughter, and I feel content with how my life has turned out. I don't owe Nick an apology, but I suppose I could thank him. If he hadn't left, I might still be trapped in an unhappy marriage. Update 1. I discovered more about Nick's situation. He hadn't known anything about my life because he deleted all his social media and had been living in Seoul for work the past few years. He just moved back a month ago and contacted a mutual friend who wasn't close to me. This friend knew about Joe's marriage but not about mine, which led Nick to my doorstep. It's strange that after nearly a decade apart, he chose to reach out, but I'm over it now. He hasn't messaged me since I ignored him, and I don't expect he will. I told Joe what happened, and even he was shocked by Nick's audacity, showing up unannounced and expecting me to welcome him back while demanding an apology for my response. My daughter asked about the man at our door, but I didn't tell her the truth. I simply said he had the wrong address, which satisfied her curiosity. I doubt I'll ever share the real story unless she finds out on her own, which seems unlikely. Update 2. Nick texted me again after a week of silence. I had forgotten to block him, which was careless, but I'm busy with work and not too hard on myself about it. In his message, he said he still had things he wanted to discuss and wanted to meet. He insisted he didn't mind that I had a husband and daughter and wanted to give our relationship another shot, implying I'd be interested in cheating on Chris. It's ironic, considering that's exactly what he left me for 9 years ago. I was appalled by the message. How could he think I'd entertain such a notion? I told him to leave me alone and promptly blocked his number. I don't want him back in my life. It's infuriating how he fails to see the damage he caused. I can't fathom why he thinks I have any feelings for him beyond resentment. I made it clear during his visit that my family is my priority now, and he should have taken the hint instead of showing me his true colors again. It makes me feel dirty to even think about this. At least now he's blocked, so I won't have to see whatever repulsive message he might send next. I'm trying to forget about the first one because it was just disgusting. Update 3. It's absurd how some of you think I'm still into Nick. I'm not. I hate him, which is entirely understandable considering I was married to him before he abandoned me. I told Chris about that text. Of course I did. I'm not a cheater, and I love him more than anything. I would never do anything to jeopardize my marriage. The only reason I even opened the door to Nick was that I have a bad habit of not checking who's outside when my husband is home. I'm working on that, but I would never knowingly let Nick back into my life. I don't want him in my life at all, so it's disgusting to think people would accuse me of that. I hope this clears things up. Update 4. Nick dropped by again, but this time I didn't open the door without checking first. Fortunately, my daughter was out with my husband visiting his parents. I was supposed to go out with them, but work got in the way. When I realized it was Nick at my door, I firmly told him through the closed door that he needed to leave and that he wasn't welcome anymore. I thought I had made it clear enough, but he wouldn't listen. He told me he was only in town for a couple more weeks before heading to another country. I felt confused as to why he was sharing this with me since I really didn't care. Then he suggested it would be convenient for us, implying that I should just give in and we could finally be together. I was horrified. Here he was, standing outside my house, asking me to cheat on my husband. I quickly told him he had 3 seconds to leave before I called the police. Yet again, he took me lightly and refused to budge. So I ended up dialing for help, and the police had to escort him away. I was grateful my daughter wasn't there to witness it, and I called Chris right away. He returned within half an hour to check on me. I was shaken but okay. I couldn't understand how Nick had found my address. The friend who mentioned Joe's marriage to him wasn't even close enough to know I was married, let alone where I lived. Now, I felt strange and uneasy in my own home, which was infuriating. Thankfully, Nick would be leaving in a few weeks, and I was counting on that to keep him away. It wasn't just about me. I was worried about my daughter. I didn't think he posed a direct danger. He didn't seem unstable, but I couldn't rule it out entirely. Even as I hid in the living room waiting for the police to arrive, he was outside pleading for a chance. He thought I was bluffing about calling the cops. Even after hearing me report him, I could only conclude that he was utterly delusional. Chris and I are now considering boosting our security measures and consulting his uncle, who's in the police force, for advice, as this whole situation has taken a really creepy turn. I don't want to stick around to see what he might do next. Update 6. I think I figured out how Nick tracked me down. After talking to a few college friends, I learned that one of them had accidentally given my address to Nick's old friend. She apologized repeatedly when I explained the situation, admitting she had forgotten to ask me first. I was still angry because her carelessness has caused a lot of trouble for me. I'm taking a break from her for now because sharing addresses without permission is just plain irresponsible, something even second graders would know better than to do. Since the police escorted Nick away, I haven't heard from him, but we're still contemplating a move, just in case he was lying about being here for only a few weeks. Chris and I don't want to take any chances, especially since our daughter goes to school nearby. I've been feeling paranoid and anxious about how this situation has unfolded. The only thing holding us back from moving is our daughter. She loves our home and has been upset since learning we might have to leave. Any advice on how to manage this would be appreciated. For now, we're just trying to navigate this situation while ensuring our safety. Update 7. Nick has relocated to Canada, and I've confirmed it with several people, so I know he's really gone. He's back on social media, which is how everyone knows what he's up to. He texted me once after the police incident, claiming he still believed something could have happened between us and that I was just too scared to act on it. He insisted that one day I would realize I still loved him and that my husband was merely an obstacle. He even offered to adopt my daughter to prove his devotion and sent me his address in Canada, suggesting I reach out when I felt ready. I couldn't believe someone could be so delusional, but at least he's gone. I blocked the new number he used to text me, so I won't have to deal with any more of his nonsense. I'm relieved we didn't have to move, especially since my daughter is so happy to stay in the home she loves. As long as she's safe and content, I'm okay with everything. We're keeping the security measures in place, just to be safe. Chris and I read Nick's last message together while relaxing on the couch, sipping wine and watching our daughter play. It felt absurd that, even after seeing my family, he still believed I would want him back. I can't fathom how anyone could be so self-absorbed. I also shared the text with Joe, and he had the same reaction as us. I'm still not speaking to the friend who gave Nick my address, though. What she did was incredibly irresponsible, and as a mother herself, she should have known better. Her actions put my family in a tough spot, and I can't forgive her for that. In the meantime, Chris and I are planning a beach trip, my daughter's favorite place, in a few weeks to unwind after these stressful times. I feel like we've earned a break. We've both been busy with work, and this getaway will do us a world of good. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown us. Much love.